Could you do the cues that you traded this morning? Like second by second, what went through your head, what you did in the background, or
A
how
hundred
you
percent.
thanks.
Absolutely. Step by step is number
Yeah.
one, we know that we have that key zone of resistance that we discussed this morning, that make or break on the cues, that line in the sand. And that was up between 467.95 to 468.18. So I knew that this was going to be an area where we could see some kind of like pivot point. What I mean by pivot point, where we come up into it as resistance, we put in a high, and then we drop. That's our pivot point, right? Where we start to drop from off from there. Or we can come up through that zone and break it, hold it as support, put in that higher low, and then have that pivot point off and move to the upside. So I'm very, very confident in that daily zone that something's probably going to happen. Whether we come up into it, hit it as a resistance and drop, or we break it, hold above it as support, and then rip. I know something's going to happen. So I got my eyes on that zone, number one. And what do we see the Qs doing? It's slowly working its way up into that zone. And since we're underneath that zone, I'm initially expecting it to be resistance until we break it, right? Since we're coming up into it from the underneath side, I expect that to be more or less resistance until it gets broken. So I'm already thinking, hey, could there be a short up here, right? Not saying there is, but I'm thinking, hey, could I have a reason to get short below all that resistance since we're coming up into it from the underneath side? So I'm already thinking about a short because we're underneath that level. Okay. What's something else that we noticed here as well on the Qs? Well, we had 467.50 monthly hedge pressure. So we always get two hedge pressure levels every single morning. We get a weekly hedge pressure and we get a monthly hedge pressure. What do we know about these levels? They're strong intraday levels of support and resistance. We know that monthly hedge pressure is stronger than weekly hedge pressure, but they're both very strong intraday levels of support resistance. So as we're also coming up into that zone, what else do we notice? We're also coming up into that strong barrier of resistance, aka monthly hedge pressure of 467.50. And so at this point in time, right, we're coming up into monthly hedge pressure. I'm not all that confident to do anything just yet right here to the short side. Why? Well, number one, I have a zone of resistance just above that I would ideally like to see hit. Number one. Number two is at this point in time, are we in an intraday uptrend? Or are we in an intraday downtrend? Are we starting to see signs of uptrend to downtrend? Like, what do we see? Well, at this exact point in time, we're still technically in a very short-term intraday uptrend where we're building highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher high. I ideally don't want to get short when we're in an uptrend, regardless of how strong that level is. I want to start to see a shift from uptrend to downtrend. I want to see something recognizable as far as how price is reacting and how price is developing. So at this point in time, I see low, high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. I'm just not yet that confident to pull the trigger short until I see what? Maybe a lower low followed by a lower high. Okay, now that's starting to look good. Or I see a lower high that could lead to a lower low. That's starting to look good as well. And at this exact point in time, we don't see any of those two things. So I'm hands off. We get this drop on off, right? Still put in a higher low here, technically speaking. We push on up. We put in a higher high. So are we still uptrending? We are, right? There's a high, there's a higher low, there's a higher high. Have I yet seen any indication of a lower low, lower high formation yet? I have not. And this higher high did what? It put us above monthly hedge pressure right into that key zone of resistance. I think I want to get short. We're below resistance, right? We could definitely start to transition and start to roll on over and fade and fall. But I still don't see anything within the price development just yet that suggests it is time to get short, right? But where's my head at? I'm thinking ahead. I'm anticipating what could happen. Like if this were to happen, right, and I see exactly this that I'm thinking in my head, this type of formation, this type of setup, if I see this happen, right, that would lead me to believe that we could see a move down. And what is that in my head that I want to see happen? I want to see, right, at this point in time, I'd like to see us get back below monthly hedge pressure. So like after we saw that higher high come through into that zone of resistance on the daily, if I want to get short, there's something I need to see take place. And what would I ideally like to see take place? Well, number one, I need to see some kind of a lower high, right? To where I can expect maybe we get a lower low. Where would I ideally like to see the lower high take place? Below monthly hedge pressure, key resistance, right? I don't just want to see a random lower high at a random level, right? I want to see that lower high take place ideally at some key resistance. Where would that be? Monthly hedge pressure if we got back below it. So at that point in time, we're trading above monthly hedge pressure. That could have easily turned support. We could have easily pushed the upside. But I'm thinking to myself, what if, just what if, we fall back below monthly hedge pressure? What if we push back up to monthly hedge pressure and we couldn't get above it and we started to roll on over? Would that give me a lower high formation off a key level of resistance? And would that be the start of a possible reversal off our first lower high into resistance? Absolutely. So that's what I'm thinking. Hey, if we were to hypothetically get back below monthly hedge, retest it with a lower high, would that be an area that I would get short? Yes. Why? Because we're starting to see the first lower high off key resistance. So that was just an idea. We don't even have that trade valid at this point in time up here, but it's an idea that if we see that take place, I would be pretty confident and pretty convicted to pull the trigger short because the probabilities of it going short are realistically in my favor. So what happened? About 3 minutes later, we got back down below monthly hedge pressure. And then what did we do? We started to build a plan. All right, if we come up and don't break monthly hedge pressure, I'm going to get short. Stops over high a day. Target, look left. Prior swing lows. Build your plan. Hey, we got a nice little 4-to-1 risk reward here. Okay, risk reward's looking good, right? We see it fall back below a key level. And if it comes up and hits it as resistance, that could be where we start to put in that official lower high and start to roll on over off key resistance. So basically what I've done there is I've analyzed the crap out of the Qs, right? I've got an idea of what I would like to see take place. And if I saw that take place, that I would be pretty convicted in an opportunity to the short side. I'm just overall through this process of analyzation and doing some due diligence, I'm building confidence and conviction on what would Josh want to see to feel confident and convicted to get short. Where would his entry be and why? We explained that. Where would my stop be and why? We explained that. And where would my targets be and why? We explained that. So that's everything that was going on through my head, everything that we were explaining leading up to the trade. And all we needed was validation to take the trade. What was validation? The lower high retest. Did it come up and hit that level to the penny? It did. How many times? 2 times. It tapped that level, rejection. We can clearly see that this is the start of a lower high off monthly hedge pressure resistance, and we have price action validating there are more sellers than buyers present. That price action right there was the icing on the cake for me. To feel confident and convicted to pull that trigger right then and there, I was okay with my stop level. I was okay with my target. And it was a great risk reward trade. And overall, things were setting up exactly the way I wanted to see them set up. To a T, beautifully, perfectly. And that right there made me extremely confident to take that trade. Okay, so that was really everything step by step leading up to that trade. Why I didn't want to get short here, why I didn't want to get short here, but why I was willing to get short here. And what it really consisted of was actually seeing the first lower high formation off key resistance. And when we start to see the market shift from uptrend to potential downtrend, and we see those lower highs off key resistance, we know there's a high probability chance that that is going to be a lower high, that we will get that next leg to the downside. It's never a guarantee. We could have easily went boop like that and got stopped out. But there's an 80% chance that this is going to be that lower high that leads to the next leg down. And so that's where our head was, that this is most likely the lower high that leads to the next leg down. And we want to capitalize on that next leg down. And so we took the trade because the odds of that happening were substantially in our favor, and the risk reward was beautiful. It was nearly a 4-to-1 risk reward. And so, hey, you give me a trade setup that's setting up beautifully, you know, meeting my expectations to a T. It's a high probability setup, and I have great risk reward. I got to take those trades, right? Got to take those trades. But the probabilities were there. The setup was there. It was developing in the fashion it should have been developing at. We clearly see, hey, that's looking to be that lower high off key resistance. We got an 80% chance of being right here. Risk reward is phenomenal. I'm very convicted. I'm very confident to take that trade. And so we did. Does that make sense, brother?
Yeah, that looks awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, dude. No, absolutely. A lot of it just came down to development and action, like price development, price action, right? When I say price development, I'm talking like, hey, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, right? How is price developing, right? And then we're starting to develop and starting to show signs of a possible reversal based on the overall development. And then at my entry point, I'm looking for price action to validate the trade. How is price acting? How is price reacting to the penny at my optimal trade entry point? And my optimal trade entry point was 467.50. So price is developing well, suggesting we could see that downturn. But is price action at that very moment validating there are truly more sellers than buyers present? And I need to see that within the price action. And if all of those things come together and I'm checking off those boxes, check, 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 I'm the most convicted and confident that I could possibly be in a trade. And that's when I pulled the trigger, man. So a lot of it was just price development and price action off really just two levels: daily resistance, intraday resistance being monthly hedge pressure, and then the majority of the trade was just analyzing price development and price action to validate an entry on the trade, and then just assessing probabilities. And just like that, keeping your trading super duper simple, we had a really good trade that honestly has exceeded our expectations. Did we nail the high today? No. But did we pretty much nail the best of the best entry of the day? Fuck yeah, we did. Absolutely. That's the point where we moved down, and we've been moving down since. Like, that was the optimal entry to the short side today, and we freaking nailed it.